Hello, I'm Jay, owner of Volunteer Audio in Oliver Springs, Tennessee. I'm making a video to show you how to install the new Soundstream HDHU14 Plus in your Harley with the Soundz audio system. So hang out as I go over what we're doing, how we're doing it, and hopefully I can help you get the same results. All right, so first, before we just get into installing the radio, I want to go over what we're working with. So Donnie brought me this bike. He's from down in Alabama. He brought it up to Tennessee to us to install his radio. First, he reached out to Soundz, and they didn't recommend him changing the radio. They said their system was built around the factory radio, and they didn't think that it was a good idea to do so. There are some very basics about amplifiers, about audio installs. I was positive we can do this, we can do it the right way. And I want to let you know what we're starting with. So 2015 Streetglide, factory GT radio with the big rubber buttons, super slow Bluetooth, nav that'll get you lost. He wants to get Apple CarPlay, Android Auto, those modern features like a GTS radio, but if you've priced them recently, it's well over $2,000 to buy a GTS radio. So I think the Soundstream's a great solution in this place. Carbon 65 front speakers from Soundz. He has the, let's get the name correctly here, I don't want to mess up, Street 69 6x9s. He also has the Street Series 6.5s in the rear. So he gave me the story. He went to Panama City Bike Week, and he first had at one of the rallies the 4-speaker system installed. It has the Soundz SM 4.100 amplifier up front. It has their T-harness and their DSP. He went back the following rally and he decided to add, or he wanted more, and so he went to their better front speakers, the Carbon 65s, and he moved those original Street Series to his Tour Pack. So now we have 6 speakers run off one 4-channel amp. All of these speakers are coaxial speakers. They have capacitors in place to protect the tweeters. And the first step is find out, is there anything wrong before we start? Because I definitely don't want to chase gremlins at the end that we didn't cause. So I've done several tests that I normally do at the end of our installation to see how this, how it sounds, how it does. So we've listened to it, and when I listened to it, I felt like there's some distortion somewhere around half volume that I'm trying to figure out what's wrong. So I get a digital distortion detector out, and I check the front outputs and the rear outputs, and the amp is set right. The gains are good. They've done a good job on that. What we expect is some distortion around 2 bars from full volume on this radio, and that's right where it is. So somebody did do their homework, they used a detector and they set it right. But here's the problem. I then did the next test. I took out this little cheap Polarity tester. They're about $15 on the internet. If you need help finding one, send me a message, I'll send you a link to it. Next I did our Polarity test. I simply hook my phone to it, I go to YouTube, I look up a Polarity test track, and I listen to each speaker with this device. Actually, let's just go ahead and simulate that and I'll show you what I found. All right, so I'm set up now to do our Polarity test, and I want to show you what I found. First off, with the track paused, I have a very small amount of floor noise or a hiss through the tweeters. Sometimes this is just common of the radio, and hopefully we'll see that that goes away. I know we'll make it better before we get done with this. All right, so I went to YouTube, I brought up my Polarity test track. I also have my Polarity tester. I'm going to turn it on and show you what I got from the front speakers. So you're going to hear some little pops. So if this thing is in polarity, I should get 3 green dots and 1 red one. So what I'm getting is I'm actually getting 3 red dots and a green dot. Let me get it up just a little bit more in volume. All right, so I had it down a little low. So I get 3 red dots, then I get a green dot. That means my front speakers are technically out of phase. This isn't a huge deal if all the rest of the speakers are also out of phase. So I tested both front ones and they're in phase with each other. I get 3 red dots and a green dot. Let's go to the back and test the rear ones. All right, so we go to our back speakers. I'll get this back going. Let's test the rear and see what we get. All right, so on the front I got 3 red flashes and a green flash. On the back I'm getting 3 green flashes and then a red flash. Okay, so what this means Now this is on the 6.5. Let's move right down to our 6x9 and see what it does. All right, so what we found out is our front 6.5s are in phase with our 6x9s. They're technically out of phase, but they match. The 6.5s in the Tour Pack, though, are wired opposite in polarity. So the positive and the negative are actually correct on these and incorrect on the other 4 speakers. Again, it doesn't matter if they're out of phase or wired backwards as long as they all match. But when we see a 6.5 and a 6x9 on the same channel, out of phase, or even on the same amp, out of phase, we're going to lose a lot of mid-bass. That 200 to 250 hertz range is just going to fall off and we're not going to hear it at all. They cancel each other out. So part of the weird stuff that I was hearing is that part of these speakers are out of phase. So by correcting that, and that's going to be part of our install. See, we're putting a radio in, now we're fixing things that weren't part of doing the radio. We're going to swap the polarity on these 2 speakers to match the other ones. That should give us a lot better sound. Now let's go up front. Let me show you what I found in the fairing. All right, so I want to show you what we have in the fairing. On this particular system, we have the SM4.100. It's a 4-channel, 100 watt per channel Soundz amplifier. It's installed in the same place that we do with our volunteer audio packages, right on top of the radio. They're actually using a harness. I believe it is a Soundz harness. It's very familiar to me as being very similar to the one that we have from Metra as an add-on DSP, add-on amp harness. And I know that they work in conjunction to make a lot of the parts. But it's a well-built harness, and I've undone a lot of the zip ties and got it out here so we can see it. It was tucked in here and looked a lot better than this. So definitely not ragging out on Soundz. I think they make good equipment. I think they have some really nice systems, and they're doing a good job of plug and play and not cutting up your harness. All of this looks very professionally done. I want to take a second though and I want to talk about this. This is the DSP that's part of the system. Most motorcycles that have a DSP, the reason they've went and put DSP on was to try to correct a signal issue with the stock radio. Now, I know that Soundz has their own flash in the Techno Research lineup, and I'm pretty sure that they flashed this radio with their flash. They then take this little DSP, it gives them a little bit more EQ adjustment rather than just bass and treble, and they can kind of tweak in and make their speakers sound better. Now, we're going to be putting in this Precision Power Soundstream Reserve HDHU14 radio. It has a 13-band EQ, high-pass filters, low-pass filters, adjustable slope. We are going to tune in what we think we need with the radio rather than relying on this DSP. Now, I know that this DSP is made in conjunction with Metra and the Access brand that they have, and I'm just not really a fan of their DSP. I know it lowers the voltage into the amplifier significantly, and we're going to get a lot stronger signal in from our radio. And the beauty of this system is, and what I wanted to really show you was, this can easily be removed, so we're not going to have to retune it to change the radio. And let me show you how this works. So this harness that they've got set up will work with or without a DSP. I can simply unplug the DSP connector. There's 2 of those, so DSP to amp. I can unplug that one as well, and our box is out. But we're going to have to do just a few changes here. So it was DSP to amplifier on our input side. I'm going to unplug both of those. And I'm going to unplug this little remote turn-on connector that was in here. And we're going to move that. So we've got our DSP harnessing out of the way. But now we still need to reconnect the input side of our amp. Their harness has this already here, and they're already labeled. So we have a front and rear input. So we're going to connect our front input up. So let's plug that in. The little cap was in place I had to remove. Same thing on the back. So we just unplugged the DSP, we took it out, we plugged back in the rear end and front end to the input side of the amplifier. So now at this point we don't have to change the harness, we're not going to have to rewire anything. We're going to be able to simply put our new radio in, plug in the T harness that they were using, and we can move forward and this is going to work. I do have a feeling that this was set up as 2-channel input, not 4-channel. So we may have to do something to get it where our fade will work, and I'll show you if I do that later on in this video. This is the amp turn-on wire, the remote turn-on wire. It already has a connector that will plug into a factory spot up here in the top of the fairing. You're going to want to plug that in because that's going to turn the amp on with ignition and not work through the DSP. So again, as a recap, we unplugged the DSP connector, we unplugged a DSP harness off, and we plugged the inputs straight into the amplifier. So let's move on. I'll put the radio in, we'll retest the signal we have and see what adjustments we have to do to the amp, and I'll show you where they need to be set. All right, so at this point, we took our radio out, the factory radio, and put our new Soundstream Reserve HDHU14 in. It uses the same connections as factory, so we plugged our antenna back in, our USB back in, and we were able to use the T-harness that was used for the sound system and just put our harness in for our precision power Soundstream radio with our thumb control module. So I've got all that plugged in. I did move the amp turn-on wire because you could plug it into the factory accessory port up here, or you can go to the one run off the radio. When you run it off the radio, it gives you the ability to set a delayed turn-on if you had an amp pop. I don't think we're going to have one. I haven't experienced one yet on this radio. I still have to do a little bit of work tidying up the wiring, but I wanted to leave it all loose so I could show you this. So I took our distortion detector and I have set all the settings on this amplifier. Now we're going to put some screenshots up on the screen showing you exactly where to put it. What I found was that they had most of these settings correct already. It is in 2-channel mode, so you're not going to have any fade capability with this radio because they didn't feed a rear input into the amp. If you want to do that, let me show you this. Right up here in the fairing, this particular connector is the rear speaker connector. It is active now, and as long as you run those wires into the rear input of this amplifier, you could have rear fade control. We didn't do that because we're going to use the same harness. We're not going to do any modification to it. And we didn't have any fade with the previous radio either. But what we found was our crossover settings were set correct for the speakers we're using. Even though they had a DSP in place, they still had set the high pass filters appropriately on here. It was set to high level in. We're still going high level in, so we don't have to adjust that. The only thing we had to reset was our front and rear gains. So I took my distortion detector and we set it with the latest software updates in the radio to the perfect place on these gains. All right, so as you see, we're going to also have a section of our website. We have an install resource section that will later add a photo on there, so you can go there as well and see it, or send a message and I'll email it to you. But you could also just pause this and look at it on the screen, exactly where you need these settings on the amplifier. Now you're probably thinking, well, maybe I don't have the Carbon 65s or I don't have the Street 65s. If you have this amplifier, this is the setting you need to set it at, because what we're doing is the maximum output of the amp unclipped to the speakers. So it doesn't matter which one of the sound speakers you have. If this is the setup you have amp-wise, those are the proper settings. So let me get it cleaned up, back together, and we'll take a listen and see how good it sounds now. All right, so I got Donnie's bike back together. I've listened to it, and I'm fixing to let you listen to it. I think it sounds so much better. We had some distortion before that almost sounded like we had a speaker maybe blown in the rear. But after getting the amps reset and getting rid of the DSP and using the EQ in the radio, it's very crisp, very clear, and I think it's substantially louder than it was before. So let's take a listen and see what you think. So as you know, that's some copyright-free music, but I think it's still very crisp, very clear. The bass still has some good lows. Donnie's going to be very happy with this system, and we're clean to full volume. When we were using the factory radio, he had to stop 2 notches from full volume to keep from blowing the speakers. We did correct the polarity on the speakers. That's part of why it sounds better, but also we got a lot more clarity out of it because I really believe the DSP flash that was being used didn't jive with the flash the radio was on. I think Soundz has done a great job with the system. It sounds really good. Amps were adjusted well. It was a rally install, but all in all, they did a pretty good job. So hats off to you, Soundz. All the bolts were in there. Everything was back like it should have been. And I think overall, this is going to be a very, very awesome system for years to come for Donnie. And this radio has brought him into the future. It looks so much better and sounds so much better. Thank you for watching. I hope that this encourages you to tackle a project like this. And if it did, or maybe you just enjoyed watching it, please like the video, share it with your friends, and please subscribe to the channel. And all of your comments encourage us to keep doing this, so thank you so much. God bless, and I hope you have a great day.